The monastery was wrapped in a cold silence that winter night. Outside, the wind scraped across the old stones, moaning as if some restless spirit wandered beyond the walls. Padre Pio had remained in the chapel long after Compline, kneeling in his usual corner beneath the faint light of a single candle. He prayed for the souls in purgatory, especially the forgotten ones, those who had no one on earth left to pray for them. He whispered, "Lord, have mercy on the lonely." But suddenly, something shifted. The flame flickered violently, then steadied, but the air changed, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Padre Pio slowly opened his eyes. At first, he thought the candlelight was playing tricks on him, casting shapes on the wall. But then a small outline began to form near the doorway, a dim figure no taller than a child. The friar blinked, thinking exhaustion was finally taking its toll. Yet the figure did not vanish. It moved. Soft footsteps, too soft to be physical, made their way across the floor. The air grew strangely cold, but not unpleasant. "Who's there?" Padre Pio asked gently, though his heart pounded once against his ribs like a warning bell. The shadow came closer, taking shape bit by bit, as if woven together by moonlight. It was a girl, no older than 7 or 8, pale, thin, almost transparent, like the mist that rises from graveyards at dawn. She clutched her hands together as though afraid she might be punished for being seen. Padre Pio's breath caught. He felt no evil presence, nor any sign of deception. What he felt was sorrow, a deep, aching sorrow that almost forced tears to his eyes. "Father," the little voice trembled, barely more than a whisper.
Padre Pio froze. The voice sounded like a child who had cried for far too long. "Please, don't be afraid of me." Her eyes were enormous, frightened but not malicious. Padre Pio tried to speak, but words clung to his throat. The child's presence felt like a cold wind passing through old memories, tragic but innocent. "How do you know me?" he managed to ask. The girl looked down. "Because I've been waiting for you." The candles flickered again. Somewhere deep in the monastery, a door creaked, though no one was awake. Padre Pio rose slowly, afraid a sudden movement might shatter her into dust. "What is your name, little one?" She hesitated, as though speaking it out loud might bring danger closer. A moment passed. She finally whispered, "Lucia." The name lingered like a fragile thread of smoke. The little girl stepped backward, fading a little with each movement, as if the darkness wanted to reclaim her. But before retreating completely, she looked into Padre Pio's eyes filled with terror and pleading. "Father, please help me." Then the chapel fell silent again, except for the trembling flame, flickering like a frightened heartbeat in the dark.
Lucia lingered near the doorway, as if too afraid to enter the chapel completely. Padre Pio sensed something fragile about her presence, like a candle struggling in wind. Slowly he approached, but kept a respectful distance, folding his hands gently as one would before a frightened child. "Lucia," he repeated softly, "why have you come?" The little girl looked around the chapel, her gaze moving over statues and crucifix, as if trying to remember what these things once meant to her. Then she whispered, "I've been alone for so long. Nobody came to look for me." Padre Pio felt a coldness sink into his heart, not fear, but sorrow, as if the child's loneliness were being poured directly into him. "Where is your family?" he asked. Lucia lowered her eyes. "I don't know anymore. They forgot me. They left me behind." Padre Pio frowned gently. "Left you? How?" She hesitated, as though words might betray a terrible secret. "I waited and waited, but no one came back. Not even Mama." Her voice cracked, a tiny sound, yet it cut deeper than any cry. "Lucia," Pio said, with fatherly kindness, "you are not forgotten. God never abandons his children." But Lucia shook her head with a heartbreaking certainty. "I can't rest, Father. I'm not allowed to rest." Padre Pio felt a chill sweep through him, not from the child, but from the meaning behind her words. Souls in purgatory suffered purification, yes, but what Lucia described was different. Something held her here, tied her to pain instead of mercy. "You came because you want peace," he said. "I came because I don't know where to go anymore," she whispered. "There is no place for me." Padre Pio knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. "Little one, listen carefully. God hears every cry, even the ones the world ignores." Lucia's translucent form trembled, her outline flickering as if fear itself was dissolving her. "If he heard me," she said through trembling lips, "why didn't he send anyone?" Padre Pio closed his eyes for a moment, knowing her question carried wounds far deeper than death. "You are here now," he answered, "and I will not turn away." Lucia's gaze softened with a fragile spark of hope, but beneath it, Padre Pio sensed an unspeakable darkness yet to be revealed.
The next morning, Padre Pio moved through his usual routine, yet his thoughts could not escape the shadow of the girl from the night before. Her voice lingered like a whisper between every prayer. "No one came to look for me. No one knows I died." He felt compelled to investigate, not out of curiosity, but responsibility. If Lucia was truly a forgotten soul, someone on earth must have neglected something sacred, a burial, a mass, even a simple prayer. Every child deserved at least that. After morning devotions, Pio quietly asked a trusted brother whether any child named Lucia had passed recently in the region. The friar paused, thought for a moment, then shook his head. "None that I know of, Father." He even went to check parish registers. Hours later he returned perplexed. "There's no such record, not in our town nor the neighboring villages." Padre Pio's unease deepened. Even unbaptized children were usually recorded in some manner: illness, tragedy, family absence, always something, but there was nothing. That night, as he sat in his cell reading scripture, the air cooled again, and he felt a presence behind him. He turned slowly. Lucia stood there, almost timid, as though afraid she had done wrong simply by existing. "Lucia," he said gently, "do you know where your body rests?" The child looked confused, as if the question didn't quite make sense to her. I don't have one anymore." The answer tightened something inside his chest. "Everyone has a place," he insisted softly. "Somewhere someone mourned you, even if only for a moment." She shook her head. "No one knows I died. Not anyone. That's why I'm still here." A fragile silence hung in the room. Padre Pio leaned forward. "Lucia, were you reported missing? Did anyone search for you?" Her expression slowly emptied, like a candle fading.
I don't think they were allowed. He wasn't sure he understood. Allowed? She murmured the word again, aloud, as if it were heavier than all the nights she had spent alone. A quiet dread gathered around them, not from the child, but from something hidden behind her story. Souls of the innocent did not wander without cause. Someone had failed her terribly, perhaps on purpose. Padre Pio realized with chilling clarity. Lucia was not simply forgotten. She might never have been acknowledged at all. A soul with no record, a death no one reported, a child who, in the world's eyes, had never even existed.
Lucia's visits became more frequent, as though night itself escorted her gently to Padre Pio's cell. Each time she appeared, she looked thinner, as if every memory she revealed cost her a part of her fragile being. One evening, while the friar prayed before the tabernacle, Lucia drifted closer. Her form flickered in the candlelight, and something caught his eye, a faint discoloration along her forearm. At first he thought it was shadow, but as she turned, the mark darkened into a bruise. "Lucia," his voice tightened with concern. "What happened to you?" The child froze, her little shoulders trembling, as though the question itself was a forbidden door. She looked down at her arm quickly, as if she hadn't realized the marks were visible. The bruises seemed to spread, along her wrist, her neck, her upper arm, signs no innocent child should ever carry. "Did someone hurt you?" Padre Pio asked softly. Lucia's lower lip quivered. Tears, ghostly yet real, gathered in her eyes. She opened her mouth to answer, but instead a small, choked sob escaped. "I'm not supposed to say. I'm not allowed."
Padre Pio's heart sank. Not allowed by whom? The dead did not fear the dead. The only thing that could silence a soul after death was terror of someone still living. He knelt beside her spectral form. "Lucia, listen to me. Nothing and no one can harm you here. You are safe." But she shook her head violently. "No! He said I must be quiet forever!" "He?" Padre Pio repeated slowly. "Who is he?" Lucia covered her face with her small hands, as if the very thought of speaking his name might bring punishment upon her soul. "I can't, Father. If I say it, he'll find me." Padre Pio's blood chilled. The living had no power over the dead. Unless the terror they created lingered like a chain even death couldn't break. He placed his rosary on the altar and spoke gently, firmly, like a father addressing a wounded child. "Lucia, no one owns your silence anymore. God is with you. No darkness can command you now." But Lucia only wept harder, and through those tears, Padre Pio finally understood. The little girl hadn't died in fear. She was still living inside it.
The following night, a storm rolled across the mountains, thunder groaning like some ancient creature awakening. Rain clattered against the monastery's stone walls, each drop echoing down the silent corridors. Padre Pio had just extinguished his lamp when he sensed Lucia's presence again, a flicker in the dark corner of his room. "Lucia," he whispered, "I am here." She stepped forward hesitantly, her form trembling like a frightened bird. "Father, I have to tell you something." Padre Pio lit a candle. Its warm glow revealed more than just her shape. Her fear radiated like a cold mist filling the room. "There was a man," she began, her voice small, barely audible beneath the thunder outside. "He would come when Mama went away. He always locked the door after she left." Padre Pio's breath slowed. And what did he do, child? Lucia wrapped her arms around herself, shivering though no earthly wind touched her. Thunder struck again, shaking the chamber.
Lucia looked around nervously, as though expecting someone to burst in through the storm. "He said if I ever told, he would make Mama disappear too." Padre Pio felt anger rise, a righteous fire burning under his calm expression. "Lucia, listen to me. That man has no power here. You are safe now." But Lucia shook her head violently. "No, Father. He's still alive." The candle flame sputtered. Darkness pressed closer, clinging to the corners of the cell. The walls groaned as if something unseen moved against them. Padre Pio gripped his crucifix tightly. "Say his name, Lucia. Tell me who he is." She opened her mouth, then stopped, frozen by terror. Her eyes widened at something Padre Pio couldn't see. "He's watching, even now." The room darkened unnaturally, as if the storm outside had seeped through stone and wood, swallowing the candlelight. A shadow slid across the wall, faint but unmistakable. Lucia backed away, voice cracking. "He told me I must be silent forever." Padre Pio lifted the crucifix toward the looming darkness. "In the name of Christ, no evil has authority in this place." The shadow recoiled. The candle flared again. But Lucia only wept, repeating the same broken plea. "Please, Father, don't make me say his name."
The storm dragged long into the night. Sleep would not come, and Padre Pio felt compelled to pray in the chapel once more. He knelt before the tabernacle, clutching his rosary, when suddenly a sharp pain pierced behind his eyes, a sudden burning light, like a curtain being torn open. A vision seized him. He found himself standing in a dim, forgotten room, damp walls stained with mold, a single barred window letting in just enough moonlight to show a small metal bed. In that bed lay Lucia, thin, pale, curled upon herself like something trying to disappear. Her breathing was ragged, her lips barely moved as she whimpered for her mother. But no answer came, only silence, thick like suffocation. Padre Pio tried to move closer, but the vision held him paralyzed, forced to watch. He saw the door locked from the outside, the latch rusted shut. A small bowl of water stood untouched in the corner. Days must have passed like this. Lucia reached a tiny hand toward the window, toward the faint moonlight, as if begging heaven itself to open. Her strength faded, breath by breath, until she grew still. Padre Pio's heart shattered. Then the vision shifted. A man entered the room, quick, nervous, terrified of discovery. He wrapped Lucia's body inside an old blanket, not tenderly, but hurriedly, like hiding a crime. He carried her out the back door of a house, through the night, toward a patch of earth behind a shed. Padre Pio felt every sickening detail, the shovel striking dirt, the ground shallow, the night heavy with guilt. No prayers, no funeral, no candle to mark her passing. Only the hurried scrape of soil being pushed over a child who had deserved love. "No," Padre Pio whispered aloud in the chapel, tears burning his eyes, even though the vision wasn't yet finished. The man whispered under his breath, trembling with rage and fear, "No one will ever know." The final image struck Padre Pio like a blow. Lucia was not buried, she was hidden, treated not as a child of God, but as a secret to be erased.
When the vision released him, Padre Pio collapsed against the pew, trembling. He understood now why no record existed, no mass, no burial, no prayer. She had not been laid to rest. She had only been covered by dirt.
At Lucia's pleading, Padre Pio sought the girl's mother in a nearby village, a quiet woman who seldom spoke to anyone. When he knocked on her door, she opened just enough to see who stood outside, then quickly tried to close it again. "I don't speak about that child," she said sharply, voice trembling. Padre Pio gently held the door, not forcing it, only pleading with compassion. "Madame, please, I come only with a message." Her face hardened. "There is no message. There is nothing to say. She is gone." The last word broke inside her throat, but she fought back every tear as if tears were forbidden. She turned away, arms crossed over her chest like shields. Padre Pio spoke softly, carefully. "Your daughter, Lucia, she is not angry." The mother froze, her breath caught. Padre Pio continued. "Lucia says she forgives you." The woman flinched as though struck. Her lips trembled. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to hold back what years of silence had buried. "She forgives me?" she whispered, almost afraid of the words. Padre Pio nodded. "She waits for peace, for both of you." The woman finally broke, shoulders shaking, tears falling freely for the first time in years. Not a mother without a child, but a soul crushed under guilt, fear, and a secret too heavy to bear. She didn't speak Lucia's name, not even once, but her tears said every word she had never dared to say. That night, Lucia returned again, shaking more violently than Padre Pio had ever seen. Her fragile voice fluttered like a candle before dying. "Father, I have to tell you something, but I'm scared." Padre Pio offered the crucifix. "Nothing in this world or beyond may command your fear now. Speak, little one." Lucia looked over her shoulder as though someone stood behind her, even in death. "He still walks around. He still smiles like nothing happened." Padre Pio asked softly, "Who?" Lucia swallowed, an instinct she no longer needed, yet her fear made the gesture real. "My mother's husband." Her voice cracked. Padre Pio closed his eyes. He had suspected, but hearing it pierced him like a blade. Lucia continued, barely breathing the words. "He wasn't my real father." A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the monastery wind wailed like a distant lament. "Father," she whispered, "he said God would punish me if I ever told anyone. He said God would make Mama disappear." Padre Pio knelt, eyes full of sorrow and righteous anger. "God is not the one who punishes innocence, child. Evil men use God's name to hide their crimes, but heaven has seen everything." Lucia trembled. "His name is—" Her voice failed once, and then returned in a whisper. "Marco." The candlelight dimmed for an instant, as if the darkness itself reacted to hearing the name that should never have been spoken. The following evening, Padre Pio knelt alone in the chapel. Lucia had not appeared since speaking the forbidden name, and silence pressed heavily around him. He prayed for her rest,
for truth to rise where darkness had buried it. His voice echoed softly through the empty chapel. Lord, deliver the innocent, and reveal what must be revealed. Then, suddenly, a voice, not Lucia's, nor anything earthly, whispered through the sanctuary, firm and resonant, "Justice is coming." Padre Pio stiffened, his breath caught. The words held no threat, only certainty, like a decree issued from heaven itself. He remained there, overwhelmed by fear and awe, until dawn colored the horizon. By morning, the monastery buzzed with unexpected news from town. A man had been taken by police the previous night. A familiar face, known in the parish, always at Mass, always eager to be seen doing good deeds. Marco. The story spread quickly. Neighbors had finally spoken up after years of suspicions. Muffled cries heard through walls, a little girl who had mysteriously vanished, strange behavior whenever Lucia's name was mentioned. For years they had chosen silence, but something had pushed them. Perhaps conscience finally awakened, or perhaps heaven itself had given courage to a frightened community.
Padre Pio listened to the whispers as brothers passed along the news. Marco had not been arrested for murder, at least not yet, but for investigation of child abuse, charges that exploded open once fear loosened its grip. The righteous anger in Padre's heart burned brighter with every detail. It was not vengeance he longed for, but truth, justice for a child buried not in earth alone, but in years of silence and fear. He returned to the chapel that night and whispered, "Lord, let your justice lead to mercy where possible, but defend those who had none." For the first time, the chapel felt lighter, not bright, but no longer suffocating. Something had shifted. The darkness that clung to Lucia seemed to retreat, and Padre Pio sensed she was no longer entirely alone.
Lucia appeared again, but this time her presence felt different, lighter somehow, though her small face still carried fear. Padre Pio found her in the chapel after matins, standing near the tabernacle as if she had always belonged there. "Lucia," he said softly, "you are not alone anymore. Truth is rising." She lowered her head, voice barely above breath. "Father, I have one more thing to say." Padre Pio approached, listening with his whole soul. "I was never afraid of dying. I was afraid that nobody loved me, not even God." The words pierced him more deeply than any detail she had revealed before. All the bruises, the locked door, the buried body, nothing broke him like this small confession.
He knelt beside her, tears shining in his eyes. "Lucia, listen to me carefully. Before any person saw you, before your mother held you, God loved you first. He never turned away from you, not for a single moment." Lucia's fragile form trembled, as if something inside her had cracked open, like a window long shut finally letting in light. "He loved me?" "More than you can imagine," Padre Pio said, placing his rosary over his heart. "You were his child before you were anybody's." A single tear slid down Lucia's cheek, but the tear glowed, shimmering like something not of this world. She lifted her eyes, filled now not with fear, but wonder. Suddenly, a soft radiance began to gather around her, faint at first, then brighter, filling the chapel with gentle warmth. Lucia looked at her hands, no longer bruised, no longer trembling. "Father, I'm not scared anymore," she whispered.
Padre Pio smiled through his own tears. "Go to him, little one."
The chapel was silent that night. Only the soft flame of the sanctuary lamp flickered against stone walls. Padre Pio remained kneeling, still absorbing Lucia's final words. He felt a strange calm, as if heaven itself had drawn nearer. The cold air changed, becoming warm, tender, almost like a blanket laid across his shoulders. Then he sensed it again, the presence he had come to recognize, not heavy with sorrow as before, but gentle, timid, like a child stepping into a room filled with light. Lucia appeared, no longer dim or trembling. A faint radiance surrounded her small figure. She clasped her hands as if afraid to speak, yet her eyes held something new. Peace. "Father," her voice was softer than he had ever heard. "The angel, he is here." Padre Pio looked up. He couldn't see the angel, but he felt the holiness, like a breath of eternity passing through the chapel. Lucia glanced behind her, smiling with a joy that made her seem suddenly alive. "I'm going home," she whispered. Padre Pio lowered his head. A tear touched his cheek, not from sorrow, but relief. All the nights of pleading, all the hidden pain buried beneath years of silence, God had heard.
As Lucia began to fade into the light, he heard the smallest voice, a child who had finally been loved. "Thank you, Father Pio. Now I can go home." The chapel brightened for a moment, brighter than candles, brighter than dawn, and then everything fell still again. Padre Pio remained kneeling long after the vision left him. In his heart, he prayed not for Lucia anymore, but to Lucia, certain she now stood among the children of heaven, finally held, finally known, finally free. The next morning, the friars found Padre Pio already in the chapel. The room was unchanged, no voice, no light, no trace of a child once trapped between earth and eternity. And yet, something was different. On the small altar beside the sanctuary lamp, a single white rose had opened overnight, pure and fresh, as if placed by invisible hands. Padre Pio touched the petals with quiet reverence. Heaven often spoke without words. That afternoon, he offered a special Mass for all the children forgotten by the world, for the little ones who died unseen, unloved, unheard, for those whose names never made it onto gravestones, whose memories lived only in the heart of God. After Mass, he remained alone in the chapel. The silence felt full, not empty. Lucia was gone, but grace remained. He whispered into the stillness, "No soul is ever truly forgotten." If this story touched your heart, please follow the channel for more heavenly mysteries and true spiritual encounters. Share this video so more forgotten souls can be remembered in prayer. And tell me in the comments, is there a soul you want us to pray for today?